Scott Cosenza for LibertyNation.com, and I'm here with Graham Noble, and Graham's going to give us the latest update on Mr. Trump's various legal teams and the news that they're making today. Graham, who are Ty Cobb, John Dowd, and John McGahn? And a 367 batting average, I don't think is going to be part of this discussion.
Well, Scott, Mr. McGahn is actually the White House counsel, I believe, the chief counsel actually for the White House. Ty Cobb was brought on fairly recently this year by the president as part of his personal legal team. And then John Dowd is also another lawyer that works on the president's legal team.
Now, Mr. McGahn is the White House counsel, and so just so people don't know this, while the White House counsel does work for the President of the United States, he's not the President's personal attorney. And so while the White House counsel has the duty to protect the office and the person of the President, he does not have a duty to protect Donald J. Trump as a human being and guard his secrets. It's a bit of a tricky wicket and a sticky wicket, and this came to the fore during in the wake of the Watergate crisis, and whether or not that lawyer represented the president himself as a human being and all the things he may do inside or outside the office of the presidency, including legal or illegal things, or the office itself. And now we have this sort of rule going forward where that person represents the office, and so there can be overlap there, but it's I guess Cobb that really is the president's private lawyer, and McGahn is the lawyer for his position, as it were. Is that your understanding of it, Graham?
Yes, Scott, that's correct. Mr. McGahn handles official White House matters, such as he might review presidential executive orders to make sure that they conform to laws regarding those issues. So yeah, he very much handles the president's official business conducted from the White House, if you like. And yes, Mr. Cobb, Ty Cobb, is actually representing the president personally.
Graham, what happened at the BLT steak restaurant that is making the news today, including your story on LibertyNation.com?
So apparently, according to a recent New York Times report, there is a little bit of friction between the two attorneys, between the White House counsel and Ty Cobb, as to how they handle the Mueller investigation. Now, just as an aside, Ty Cobb was actually specifically brought on by President Trump to handle the White House's response to that investigation. Ty Cobb is actually a criminal defense attorney. Now, what happened recently is that Mr. Cobb was having lunch with Mr. Dowd in a steakhouse in Washington, D.C. And perhaps his first mistake is that Mr. Cobb bears a passing resemblance to Colonel Sanders. So what he was doing in the steakhouse is another question. Now, just by one of those amazing coincidences that, of course, Washington, D.C. ultimately is kind of a small town when it comes to political circles. And there happened to be a New York Times journalist in the restaurant, apparently, that overheard Mr. Cobb's remarks to Mr. Dowd, and Mr. Cobb was actually expressing concerns that Frank McGahn was perhaps holding out on him in terms of Ty Cobb's attempting to gather relevant documents to be handed over to the special counsel. He was suggesting that McGahn is actually holding on to certain documents in a locked safe. And he also suggested that another lawyer who is unnamed within the White House legal team is acting as, and this is a quote, McGahn spy. So these comments were aired fairly indiscreetly in this restaurant and over by a New York Times reporter.
All right, Graham. So if I'm hearing this correctly, it's the president's then personal lawyer who's trying to put his foot on the gas pedal of disclosure and turning things over to Mueller, and then it's the institutional attorney who's saying, well, let's reserve and only be responsive to the extent that we're compelled to, in terms of just the actual dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's, rather than completing sentences for the special counsel. Is that a good thumbnail sketch of what's going on there?
Yes, Scott, that's basically exactly what's happening. You see, McGahn is, within his capacity as White House counsel, he is essentially trying to protect the office of the president. And he's looking into, he's wary of setting any precedents, if you like, in terms of executive privilege that this or a future president may evoke in such a situation. So he's trying to be a little more restrained in exactly how open and forthcoming the White House is with information regarding Mueller's probe. Now, Cobb is looking at it from a much more personal point of view. He's representing Trump personally. He is trying to expedite the process of this entire special counsel, that being Robert Mueller, investigation into alleged collusion with the Russians. And so he wants to provide as much information and be as forthcoming as possible. And to date, the White House has absolutely complied with every request for documentation and cooperation from the White House. Tiger wants to keep that momentum going. He's trying to get through this process, and he's trying to get this distraction, this spotlight, if you will, off of the president, so that the president himself can get on with what he's supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you for that wrap up. For Graham Noble, this is Scott Cosenza for Liberty Nation TV. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.